Okay, if any one of you can quickly confirm whether I'm audible and the screen is visible.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
sir. It's
Audible.
visible.
Yeah.
Visible, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so today we'll start with a more focused look on the typical learning problems that can be handled by the machine learning domain. So we'll start with the broad categories of problems. So one of the important class of problem one of the important class of problem is typically called as the regression problem. So in regression problem, what you have is you have some features and you want to predict a continuous variable as output. So the input is a set of features. Input is a set of features, and output is a continuous value. So for an example, let us say that consider the price, the tentative price of a house. Okay, so what you are given is you are given the area, the information about the area, the area in square meters. You are given factors like distance from commercial places, maybe distance from services like schools, hospitals, etc., and so on. So you have a set of input features which you can consider as x1, x2, x3, and so on. And what you output is basically the tentative price of a house, which is a continuous variable, right? So your yi is the output depending upon the input that you have passed to your function, which can be x1. So I will denote this ith input as a number at I. So x1, x2i, x3i, and so on. Okay, so if you are given a set of input, you predict the output, which is a continuous variable or a continuous value in terms of the price over here, which is so. In this kind of setting, this is what is called as a regression kind of setting. This is a regression problem. On the other hand, problems where the output is discrete. Okay, so the input is a set of features. Input is a set of feature. And your output is discrete. Okay, for an example, if you can take for an example, let input be like you want to predict given a given radiographic image is an image of a malignant or a benign tumor, right? So what you can do is that you can give the image in terms of, so the image can be like, for example, if it is a image of a breast data, like a size of the tumor. Okay, so the input is the size of the tumor, the opaqueness, okay, and so on. Several other features can be there, and the spread, haziness, and all these things can be there. And your output is whether it is benign or malignant. You can have additional classes like doubtful. Okay. Okay, but at least the output you should be, the important here is that the output is not a continuous, it is actually a discrete set of output. Okay, and this typically becomes a, so this what was the initial one, this was the regression, and this typically becomes a classification problem. You can model problems in either ways. Okay, when you are considering an important problem, you can consider a problem at given hand can either be modeled as a regression problem or a classification problem, obviously depending upon the scenario that you are considering. So a typical example can be like when you are finding out the sentiment of a particular text. Okay, so the sentiment of a particular text you can consider it as a positive sentiment or a negative sentiment. Okay, so when you consider it as distinct category that either it belongs to a positive or it belongs to a negative, then it basically becomes a kind of a classification problem. But when you say that my means the sentiment will vary from say 0 to 1, where 1 indicates the positive and 0 indicates a negative sentiment, and it can be in a continuous range from 0 to 1. So you don't give a sentiment, but you give a sentiment score. Okay, you are not fixing the sentiment in a discrete sense, but you are giving a sentiment score. Then it becomes a typical regression problem because you are your output is now a continuous valued function which you are determining. So this is a regression problem. But when you are trying to model the problem such that the output is either a positive sentiment or a negative sentiment, then it becomes a typical classification problem. So dealing with regression problems, so regression, I expect that regression problems, probably regression has been done in some courses or the other, which we are not going to do it in much details, but at least in the regression setting, the typical problem goes like this. So when you consider a regression, you have a set of input features. So x1, x2, x3, x4, and so on, and you have a I, the feature or the output that you want to generate. So yi is the output then. So regression is typically what is called as a parametric model. Okay, parametric models. I just throw away this term as a jargon, but I will tell what it basically means. So it can be, typically these are actually parametric models. Parametric models basically means that you consider a predetermined structure of the model. Okay, so how do you model? So if it is a linear regression, if you are trying to model a given data as a regression, like for example the price of the housing. Okay, so if x1, x2, x3 are the different features that we had discussed, and and yi is the output that you want to find. So generally what you do is you say that okay, I'll try to model this data that I am given, the data that I am given over here, the output is modeled as a linear combination of the input features. So how do you model it as a linear combination of the input features? You model it by a term like this. Okay. Don't forget to imagine this I, okay, because it's the ith data, and so let me keep this suffix I over here. Okay, so this is the ith data, and this is the y denotes the prediction, the output that you are trying to predict. Why it is parametric? Because you have fixed the structure of the model. Okay, you are assuming that the model is a kind of a linear in terms of the input features. What you are trying to determine is, your only job is to determine the values of these parameters. Okay, beta 1, beta 2, beta 3, the coefficient of x. Okay, right. So those models where you try to actually derive the parameters and you fix the model a priori, they are called as parametric models. Regression is a typical parametric model, right? You want to find out the values. So how do you do this? Simply you are given this training data, so you are given some data which from where you actually will try to derive the model. Okay, and this goes true for any classic machine learning problem, either be it a regression or be it a classification. So what you do is that you must have some data which is a labeled data. Okay, you must have some data which is a labeled data. What is a labeled data? Labeled data basically means that you know the for some set of data, you know the values of yi. That is what is the label. So for if you consider the price of the housing, you have some data in terms of x1, x2, x3, and you know the tentative price for this. Okay. Obviously, there can be several factors which might vary, like the pricing for any features that you take in Bombay might not be same as in beta, even though the features, the amenities might be same, the area and etc. might be same. But we ignore such kind of variations and we assume that such variability in the yi do not exist. Okay, and if there are only thing that exists is that the variations are typically random. So what am I trying to say is that if you look at the actual data, if you look at the, so consider only a single parameter for visual clarity. So suppose there is only one parameter or one attribute. So these xi, here there are two things. One is the label, another is these attributes, right? So these attributes are the data corresponding to these attributes are called as predictors. So these x1, x2, x3, they are all variables which are called as predictor variables. Okay, remember, predictor variables are supposed to be independent of each other. Okay, that is true for any kind of a machine learning model, that these variables which are independent of each other, okay, are called as the predictor variables, and yi is actually dependent upon the values of these predictor variables and is termed as response variable. Okay, so suppose let us consider that we have only one predictor variable, say x, and I am trying to find out, depending upon x, I am trying to find out the predictor variable y. So you have corresponding, if you look at the data, you will have the data gets scattered like this. Okay, so like something like this. So what you are trying to model is, you are trying to model y as beta 0 plus beta 1 x, which is a typical linear straight line, but in reality data will be scattered. So you are trying to fit this line. Okay, in reality, for a given value of x, according to this model, the value of y would be fixed, but in reality, the values of the corresponding values of y will actually vary. Things are fine as long as this error, okay, the difference from the true value and the predicted value, this error is actually random. Then linear model will actually give you a good fit. So if you say that the error values is given by this epsilon term, so what we assume is that the error values are independent and they are random. That is what is the major consideration of any regression model. Okay, so I hope I have given some intuition about what is a regression model. For the case of classification, similar things actually hold. Only thing is that your output, the consideration should be similar. Only thing is that the output is discrete. Okay, the output is discrete. So any question up till here? So this is a typical example of a linear regression where the predictor variables, the response variable is a linear function of the predictor variable. It's a linear function, not more than power of 1, but it is not necessary. Okay, in linear regression you can have different non-linear models also, so you can have something like okay, some non-linearity can also be there, which so your job basically is to derive the beta 0, beta 1, beta 2 from the training data that you is that you are given. So the label data is an absolute necessity. So from this label data, you actually select some portion of the data which will be using to find out this beta 0, beta 1, beta 2, and that data will be called as the training data. A part of the data is reserved. A part of the data is reserved for testing the accuracy of the model that you have developed on unknown data. Okay, so that is what is called as or unseen data, right? That is called as the testing data. We will see all these parts later. So for the classification, so regression, I have told you that this is one of the way in which regression models are handled. So means there are several techniques to find out this beta 0, beta 1, beta 2, and so on. I won't go into it currently right now because it actually requires some concept of linear algebra. So I will be focusing very briefly on the linear regression maybe after I have completed the linear algebra part. For the classification, for the classification setting, there are several methods. Okay, so when you consider features that are already given, so here if you consider a training data like this, these are the features that you actually consider. So when you are given some features, what you can do is you can use these features to make some classification, make some prediction about the output. Like given a textual data, the possible features. So suppose you are given a text document. Okay, so suppose you are given a text document and you want to find out the sentiment. Okay, what can be the possible features, if somebody can tell me? You are given a text document and there you want to find out the sentiment of that document, means whether the document is a positive, saying something positive about a central theme, or it is saying some negative, okay, about a particular concept, okay, which is a very important and a relevant problem. So what can be the features, if somebody can say me?
Words can be the feature, sir.
Yes, typical
Specific word.
yes, typical words can be the features. So all the words, if you, yeah, please mute. Or you can also consider words like predefined positive and negative words. Okay, so predefined count of positive and negative words, that can also be considered as features, right? Similarly, and obviously the output is typically the sentiment. So what you do is that there are several classification techniques that actually works on this particular principle. So most common and the simpler ones are like logistic regression, Naive-Bayes techniques, support vector machines, okay, or k nearest neighbors, and all these things. Okay, there are several of these techniques. Just remember few of these names and try to have a look at it, okay, because we will not go into the details much. Okay, again for the classification, there is the setting is almost similar. Okay, so you again have a parametric model, and which is something like this, and what you try to predict is again yi, okay, which is obviously not continuous but somehow discrete. Okay, that is what you do. Typically, all these methods can also handle nonlinearity in its own way. There are capabilities. The capabilities of handling nonlinearity is higher for example, for support vector machine, naive Bayes, as compared to the logistic regression. But nonlinearity is somehow a bit of a problem. Okay, nonlinearity somehow remains a bit of a problem to be handled, and the other aspect is that the model accuracy actually depends upon the features that you have chosen, x1. So if you have chosen a wrong set of features, obviously your model is not going to perform that well. Okay, and that's why, because of these reasons, neural networks are a popular choice that has now come up. We will start with a very brief concept about the neural networks. Okay, which is what we are supposed to learn in this particular course. Right. So the concept of neural network actually stems from a very old concept called as perceptron. Okay, so if you look at the slides provide you some idea about it. Yeah. So this neural network concept, it has actually a very long history. Initially, from 40s to 60s, it was a very popular topic which was even taught in the higher means in engineering academia, and was typically known as cybernetics. 80s to 90s, it came up as neural net or connectionism, and then from 2006 and maybe 2010 afterwards, it gained popularity, and we now basically use the term deep learning. Okay, because the number of okay, why deep learning, that is a different thing. I'll reserve it for explaining later. Right. So the learning algorithm of this neural network actually tries to mimic the learning that happens in brain. Okay. So your brain receives several signals, right? So depending upon the neurons, so depending upon the signal that you receive, certain neurons get activated, and you have certain sensory outputs that happen. Okay, so this is how a wide area of learning actually came, that how typically brain tries to learn. Okay. And that was what initially was being given much stress, to understand how the learning happens in the brain. But obviously, deep learning or learning techniques using the neural networks has grown or diverged from how the brain functions. The functioning of the brain typically is a bit more complex, and what we do is in neural net, it has diverged away from actually how the brain works. It is somehow different. But anyway, means the basis or the very atomic entity which actually drives the neural network concept is typically known as the perceptron. So the perceptron concept is very simple. What it does is that, just try to understand this. It is sorry. So it takes as some input. So x1, x2 are certain input, and what you do is that you take a weighted sum of these inputs, right? So W1 and W2 are the weights which are given to each of these inputs, right? So you have a summer, or which finds out the sum of the weighted sum of these inputs. So basically W1 x1 plus W2 x2. Forget about the 1 for a moment now. And if this value of W1 x1 plus W2 x2, if it is greater than some threshold, then you output a 0, or you output a 1. Okay, or vice versa. If it is greater than some value, some threshold, so what you have is that you have two components. One is a summer which does basically the weighted sum of these inputs, and you have a thresholder which considers the output of this sum, and if the output is beyond the threshold value, you output a 1, and otherwise you output a 0. Okay. To control so what you have is that here if x1 and x2 are both 0, obviously the output would be 0, right? To have a kind of a control on the output, you have a bias. Okay, you introduce a bias which is a kind of a fixed input which is constant, so you multiply this, the weight of the bias is 1, okay, and you control the output even if the input, both the inputs are typically equal to 0, right? So now you see that in the case of regression, you are finding out x1, I would add the beta 0 term also, beta 0 plus beta 1 x1 plus beta 2 x2 and so on, and this yi was giving a continuous value. In the case of the perceptron, the yi output is actually a discrete output and is given by this threshold. So you have the threshold. So if the output value is greater than the threshold, you output a 1, and if it is lesser than the threshold, you simply output. So you squash it, right? You basically squash it to either 1 or a 0. This is a very simple functionality of the perceptron, but you will find that this perceptron actually can solve a lot of problems. Okay, it can actually help you to solve a lot of problems. For an example, one of the simple problem that it can try to solve is the gates, okay, or the truth table. So suppose you want to devise a model which will output the output, or which will mimic the output of the AND gate. Okay, so in the AND gate, what happens that you have a 1. Okay, you have a 1 only when both the inputs are 1, right? You have a 1 only when both the inputs are 1. So this green 1. All the other cases, all the other 3 cases is a 0, right? So if you are given some input, okay, if you are given some input, not exactly maybe a 0 or a 1, or maybe somewhere very near to 0 and 1, or maybe equal to 0 and 1, what you can see is that you can clearly have a kind of a linear separation which separates your 0 and the 1. So all these 3 is 0, right? All the 3 is 0, and this green is a 1. So you can have a linear separation like this. Okay, you can have, not sure whether you will be able to see this. So if you consider this table, so this is x1 and x2, and your output is 1 only when these two are near to 1. Okay, for the rest of the cases, the output will be all 0, right? So what you have is that you can have a linear separator like this. Okay, so when x1, the values of x1 and x2 when passed through a function comes in this area. Okay, so you want to have a function, so let me have this function which takes as input x1 and x2, right, and outputs a value. So when this function comes or returns an output in this particular area, you can predict a 0, okay, else in this region you predict a 1, right? And how we can do this? How you can do this? You can fix up these weights. Okay, you can learn these weights which will actually do this particular task. So for an example, if you set your bias value to be minus 1.5 and all the weights to be equal to 1, then you can see that if x1 and x2, sorry, so this is x1, x2 you take here, so x1 you take as 0, x2 is take at 1. So the summer will give you minus 0.5, and you do an appropriate thresholding in terms of 0, you get a 0 in this. Okay, you can do it for AND gate, NOT gate, NAND gate. You can do it for many things, right? Now, what about this XOR gate? Can you have, so XOR, what you have in XOR gate, when the values are opposite, okay, you have a 1, okay, and same values will return a kind of a 0, right? So can you have a separation which is linear for the case of the XOR gate? Can you have a linear separation for the XOR gate?
No, sir.
You can't have, okay, because in the case of XOR gate, you have your positives here and your negatives here. Okay, so obviously you cannot have a linear separation like this. Okay, so you need to have two separators. Okay, you need to have two separators, then only things will be possible. Rather, a nonlinear separation like this, okay, will rather help you doing that. So anyway, you cannot have a continuous curve which is linear and get a separation of this XOR, right? You cannot have it. So that is one of the, so can this be modeled by a perceptron? Can you model this XOR gate by the perceptron as what we have learned here? Anybody? So perceptron was very good at modeling this AND gate. Why? Because what you are saying as a perceptron, what you are doing, the perceptron is typically taking this function. It's a linear function in terms of x1 and x2, right? So when the linear function is beyond the threshold, you output a 1 or a 0 depending upon whatever condition you take. But the output is actually depending upon the linear sum of the input. That is what is more important in this case here. Okay, your output is actually depending upon the linear sum of this input, right? So can this now perceptron be used for modeling something like this XOR gate? Obviously, the answer is no, right? Because here your separation boundary is not a linear separation boundary. Remember, the separation boundary concept is very important, okay? Because in machine learning, yesterday in the last class, I gave you an example of this spiral. Okay, so the spiral look actually was what it was a kind of an arbitrary shape, right? And when you passed it through a neural network, what you do is you transform the point and you kind of create a linear separation. That's what typically the job of these kind of perceptron actually is. So you typically transform it in a way such that you can actually find out a separation boundary which is linear. Okay, that is what the perceptron is doing. Although in certain cases the boundary might not be linear, and that's why you need to go ahead beyond the perceptron. But the drawback of this simple perceptron model is that it is only when the separation boundary is non-linear, the perceptron model cannot work, right? But still, it is one of the important models or important startup means a concept to actually start with, right? Okay, so let us now focus on how this parameters, or I would say these weights, the W, can actually be learned. So what you have is that if you look at the perceptron, so in the case of perceptron, in the case of perceptron, I had inputs like x1 and x2, and I had a bias. Okay, the bias value is constant. What I do is, right, I pass it through a linear summer considering the weighted values, and then I pass it through a thresholder which will categorize this output, right? That is what typically I am doing. What do I need to learn? What am I trying to learn here? When you are building a perceptron model, what is the data that I have considered? The data that I have considered here is typically, for an example, I have considered the AND table. Okay, so in the AND table, I have x1, I have x2, and then I have a value of y, right? So 0, 0 is 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0 is 0, 1, 1 is 1. You can consider this truth table as my label data, because I have the label, I have the input data x1, x2, and also I have the label y, right? What is the thing that I need to learn to build this model? So using this data, very good. Using this data, I have to train this typical model, okay, this perceptron model. So my job is what? That I have fixed the structure of this model. Okay, what I have done, I have fixed the structure of the model. What I have considered as the model, I have considered that my output y is nothing but a kind of a thresholded output, okay, a thresholded output of the weighted sum of the inputs, okay, plus some bias. Sometimes this thresholded sum can be typically only the sign, okay, so I can replace the thresholded sum by the sign, okay. So if this is positive, things are positive 1, if this is negative, then things are 0, or you can have an arbitrary threshold also. Okay, so this bias actually controls this threshold. You need not consider an arbitrary. You can control the bias, and then arbitrarily this threshold can be considered as greater than 0 or less than 0. So that's why you can replace it by the sign. And what do I need to learn so that the model gets ready? The only thing that I need to learn is these parameters, right? So the question comes that given a set of input, what should be the typical weights W1, W2 that I should learn so that the output Y actually mimics this data. Okay, this is what is the concept of the perceptron. Okay, so what should be the weights of W1, W2 such that given a set of input from this table, the output mimics the output that is given in the training data, right? So any question? Yeah. So how do I determine the weights? How do I determine the weights? So there are several techniques. Okay, there are, or rather many popular techniques, out of which two are quite popular. So one is called as the perceptron training rule. One is called as the perceptron training rule, and another is called as the gradient descent. Okay, and delta rule. Okay. Gradient descent is the one which will be using it all throughout our course, because this is a very important technique for finding out the weights. Okay, but what we should try and understand is that how should we determine the weights. Okay, how should we determine the weights? That is what these two rules actually differ. Okay, that is what means the main difference between the rules lies. So in the perceptron training rule, let us consider the first one. So in the perceptron training rule, the weight Wi at every iteration is revised as Wi, I will say as new, is equal to Wi old plus some delta Wi, where this delta Wi is simply equal to the error, okay, multiplied by this. What is this error? Error basically is the difference between the observed output from your model. So this is the observed output from your model. And T is the target that you are trying to achieve. So this is the output that you find in the training data, and this O is the output that you observe from the model, right? So what you do is you start with some arbitrary set of weights. Okay, so if I say, like, for example, my initial set of W1, W2 can be fairly arbitrary. Let it be 0.01, 0.09. It can be any arbitrary values, does not matter. So what happens is with this arbitrary set of values, you find out the output yi, and then you compare the observed output that you get with the target output that you want to achieve. Obviously, if the target and the observed value matches, then you are doing good. There is no need to change delta. So obviously this, when there is a match, this will be closer to 0. Okay, you do not need to change it much. But when there is a difference between the target and the observed, so suppose this, remember this is a binary classification. So either your observed value is a 1 or a 0, and so is the target. So when both are 0 or both are 1, nothing to change, right? But when there is a difference, so for an example, if T is 1 and O is 0, then there has to be a positive change, right? So you need to increase the value of the weights, because you are actually underperforming in terms of the observed output when the observed value should actually be higher. So you should tend in a positive fashion, right? So delta is positive in this case when O is 0 and T is 1, and negative when the vice versa, when the reverse happens. Okay, and eta is what? Eta is basically the learning rate. So you have few components. So eta, which is the learning rate. Learning rate basically means that if this difference that you are observing, okay, if this difference that you are observing, you are giving huge importance to your new update on this observed error, then you have to keep the value of eta high. Okay, so there are two things. Either you can rely much on your old data, because gradually you will be learning wi. Okay, so you started with some random values, some arbitrary random values, but over a course of time, when you follow this rule over the set of data, the wi values are steadily going to change. So when you when you try to find out the new wi, either you can rely on the old one, which you have learned gradually over seeing a lot of data, right? And or you can rely on the current data itself. Okay, so if your current wi somehow is not equal, not producing the desired output, you can make a huge fluctuation in your new weight value if you keep the value of eta to be high. So this is why it is called as a learning rate. So there are few terms that we have introduced. So T is the target output, O was the observed output, and Xi is the input, actual input, right? Can you say what is the problem with this? So this is what is called as the perceptron training rule. What is the problem with this? Can anybody say me? So you have
the determination of that learning rate.
Yeah, see, learning rate determination, let me kill the cat right from the beginning. Learning rate determination will always remain a challenge, right? And you will see that when you are finding out even for the deep learning problems, this learning rate is something which is nobody going to tell you. Okay, it's a parameter, it's a hyperparameter which you have to play with. Okay, it's a hyperparameter. Hyperparameter basically means that you are not going to learn that parameter from the model. Okay, it's not going to get, you are not going to get a value of this parameter automatically, right? Wi is something which is being learned automatically, so it is a parameter of that model, of the model. there will be some parameters which you have to handcraft manually, and those will be called as hyperparameters. Eta, the learning rate, is one such hyperparameter. You have to know that for which particular value of eta things are producing better results. Okay, so that is something which a hyperparameter is actually going to do. Okay, so it will remain a problem. And so hyperparameter in this case is not an issue. Doing a kind of a step jump. So either you are moving this way, okay, or like this. Okay, so it's a kind of a sawtooth kind of a thing that you are actually doing. Okay, that's how this W is getting changed. Either it is moving in one positive direction, it is going in the negative direction, which is not a continuous change. Okay, so here this change is actually very discrete and is not differentiable. Okay, not differentiable. So it requires a kind of a it is a difficult to stabilize. Okay, depending, it's actually a difficult, it's not a differentiable which you can learn automatically. It depends upon the current data. Yeah, somebody is trying to say anything.
So initial value of W is challenge.
Yes, initial value of W is always also is a challenge because here you are only considering a two-dimensional plane, right? Only it's a two-dimensional plane. But in many practical cases, like for example, the sentiment one. So somebody said that the words can be considered as a feature. If you are considering a word as a feature, and then in your document corpus, there can be millions of words. Okay, so the feature can also range up to millions, right? It's also a very extreme case, but generally in many practical cases, the dimensions or the number of words that you have to learn, the number of weights that you have to learn might range up to thousands. Okay, and it goes to million in many cases. It does, like for large scale images, million order weights is not a very unpredictable thing. Okay, so that's what is the difficulty in this case. Okay, so when you have some million order weights, then the initial value of W1, W2 that you will be choosing will actually determine that how good you will be able to reach the minimum or the desired weight values that will be giving you the best results. Okay, because your space becomes very large when you have W1, W2, W3, W4, Wn. Okay, the space where you have to find out the optimal value, that becomes very large, and so then means finding out or starting with a initial value of W1 which is closer to the optimal value is actually a difficult one. That remains a challenge. That also will remain as a challenge. Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Sir, what can be the range of learning rate?
Learning rate generally are not very high. Okay, you in many cases you start with 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, and then you can go up till 0.9 and so on. Okay, so there is no fix. It depends upon application to application, right? So I cannot say that this is the fixed learning rate value which means is kind of a thumb rule for everything. It actually does not happen like that. Okay, so the other rule, the other way that actually helps us out is the gradient descent. Okay, gradient descent. So in gradient descent, what you do is you find out the error. You find out the error, which I will say as for a given data ED. For a given data ED, it is actually given as the target for that data minus the observed for that data sum over all data in the entire data set whole square. Okay, so you basically take the square sum of the error. Okay, I put an half over here. Why the half? That you will probably understand it shortly. So what you have, if D is the set of training examples, if D is the set of training examples, right? OD is the output observed for a data D. TD is the target or the actual output. The actual output for data D. Then this is what is called as the loss function. So I'll typically square it out. So this is what is called as the loss function, which is one of the very principal component of any learning techniques, right? So what you want to do is that you want to minimize the loss. Very obvious. You want to minimize the loss. You want to have the target and the observed value very close or maybe equal to each other. That's what you would like to do. So what you do here is that here TD depends upon the data. It is already given by the data set, and OD is something which is determined by your model. So remember, what is my OD? What is my OD for the case of perceptron? It is the sign. It is the sign into sigma WIXI plus the bias, right? For all I. That's what I have been doing. And so you can understand this OD is actually determined by this WI that you have considered. And this loss function is something which you want to minimize. So so what you have done now, you have kind of modeled the loss function. You have modeled the loss function with respect to this WI, okay, with respect to the WI. And what you want to do is that you, in the gradient rule, you want to update this WI by taking the gradient of this loss function. Okay, so what you have done is, you can see that if W1, W2 are the set of parameters, by using such a function like this, okay, it's a typical function which is a kind of a convex function. So there is a very nice convexity that will be there. Okay, forget about it. Right. This is a typical example of a convex. You have a very nice global minima. Okay, you have a very nice global minima. And what you want to do is that this is your loss function. So for which W1, W2 you will like to choose? You will like to choose this one because this will give you your loss. So this is my, if you draw this ED, okay, this ED is nothing but a kind of a very smooth convex function with respect to W1, W2. Obviously, I have considered for visual means clarity, I have considered W1, W2, but for actual cases, the dimension of W, the weight dimension can be much higher. Okay, but at least the convexity property still remains. And what is important over here is that reaching to this minimum W now is a bit easier because you have a neat surface on which you should work out. So at least what you can do is that this is a differentiable. This particular, you take any point, and in this curve at any point you can get a neat gradient, okay, or a neat I would say you can differentiate. Okay, you can differentiate. So what does the differentiation will give you? This differentiation will actually provide you a direction, okay, through which you can travel so that you can reach this global minimum. Okay, that's what is the importance of having this convex function, right? So it actually steadily gives, if you take a differentiation at any arbitrary point, you will get a direction, okay, which works out towards the minima. So once you reach the minima, you will get, okay, the differentiation to be, and once you cross it again, the gradient is going to increase. Okay, so that's what typically is the rule. So what you do is you get the gradient of E. That's what you do. You derive the gradient of E. Okay, so delta EW will simply be equal to, since there are multiple weight parameters that are involved, so simply the gradient of this multivariate kind of a curve is a vector. Okay, it's a vector which is simply given as W1 Okay, this is a this is a vector. Obviously, you can understand this. A vector is something which has a direction, and this vector is something which actually gives you the direction towards the. It's actually a direction towards the maxima, but we will be using this to reach the minima. If you take the negative of it, you get the direction of the minima. Okay, the gradient actually gives you the direction of the maxima, but what I want is I want the negative of this gradient so that I can reach the minima. So you want the negative of the gradient. So what you do is that now you have Wi new is given as Wi old plus of, sorry, delta Wi. This is my update rule. Okay, where this delta of Wi, where this delta Wi can now be simply given as minus of eta del Ed by del Wi. Okay, I won't say this Ed because I will take the sum over all data. Okay, remember this, I would not use the prefix Ed. Ed was only Td minus Od whole square. I have summed it over the entire data, so I should not use the Ed over here, right? Okay, so this is what my new update rule actually gives. So delta Wi is actually equal to minus of eta delta E into delta this. Okay, which is equal to what? You can now very easily means given this kind of a rule, you can find out this gradient quite easily. Okay, you can find out this gradient quite easily. So I have taken Wi. I will vary from 1 to the maximum dimension that you have. So 1, 2, 3, 4, I is going to vary till the maximum dimension. So delta E, delta Wi is simply given as D belonging to D. I'm just differentiating this. Which is equal to, so this 2 and this 2 will vanish away. What will only remain is Td minus Od into del Wi Td minus Od. I'm just differentiating this. I'm doing nothing else. Okay, I'm just differentiating it with respect to Wi. Okay, so when you differentiate it, it's simply equal to twice of Td minus Od delta of this with respect to Wi. That's what I get. So somebody should now help me out. What will be this? What would be this? So this is equal to Td minus Od, D belongs to D, and what would be this differentiation? Somebody?
Wi.
It's simply, so this is a linear function, right? Delta T, Td is not dependent upon Wi, Td is the target. So only thing is dependent upon, Od is dependent, it's a linear function. So it's simply equal to minus of x. So you are taking the negative of this. Did I miss the negative part? It's minus of Od. It's minus of Od. So it's simply equal to minus of xi, minus of xi. I'm taking the differentiation with respect to Wi, so it's simply equal to minus of xi. So this is nothing but equal to, this is nothing but equal to, let me write it in a more neater way. Okay, D belongs to D, and which is the update. So this is your, this is what you get. So your delta is nothing but eta multiplied by this term. Okay, eta. So this minus minus gets positive, and that's what you get eta. So this is what is your, this is what actually the gradient descent will typically do, right? And we would see that what are the pitfalls, how things will work. But what I have given you is, I have given you a flavor of a very basic neural network architecture, okay, which is a single layer perceptron, which you can easily train to get or to learn these weight parameters, okay, to learn these weight parameters. Now, obviously, as I told you, the major drawback of this perceptron is that it can only model linear separation, right? So that is where the complexity should be introduced. You need to have powerful models which can actually model nonlinearity, okay, which can actually model nonlinearity, and that is where the deep neural network architectures or multi-layer perceptron concept comes. So the next important step ahead of this perceptron is the multi-layer perceptron. The multi-layer perceptron, which is nothing but typically the real neural networks that we actually work. So what you do is that you combine these perceptrons. Okay, so you combine these simple perceptrons. So what you have, I had the input x1, x2 and the bias. And in multi-layer, what you do is that you can have multiple layers. So I can have one layer like this. So I would say this as W11, W12 and B1. So I can have one unit like this. I can also attach further units from this input. Okay, so I can attach also. So this is a summer, this is another summer. I can also attach one more unit like this. Okay, and when you are attaching again, so what would be the weight? It would be a different weight. So when I have x1 in this unit, it goes as x1 W11, and here it will come as a different weight. So x1 maybe W12, something like this. So W12. Okay, and I can attach further. I can attach further units too, like this. Okay, so if you go ahead like this, you are adding more and more layers, perceptron layers, and that's why they are called as multi-layer perceptron, right? There is one more thing to follow up. What is the thresholding doing over here? The thresholding, so if you remember that once you have in this multi-layer perceptron, sorry. This thresholding is actually doing a kind of a transformation of the data. Okay, it's not a linear transformation. So if it is greater than 0, it is pushing it up to 1. If it is lesser than 0, it is squashing it down to 0. It's not a linear transformation. So this is adding a bit of a non-linearity in your input data. Had it only been linear, so if this had not been there, what would have been there? It would only be a kind of a linear separation that you are or a linear function of the output. Okay, so it typically starts becoming similar to that of a regression value, right? It starts becoming similar to that of a regression value. And when you are adding this thresholding or this quashing, it actually adds some amount of non-linearity in the output function, and then it starts acting like a classifier. So this non-linearity is much more important. It's an important feature for the case of classification. And what you can understand here is that this Wi xi, you can see that there is a kind of a vector multiplication that are involved in it. Okay, so W1, so if you consider the weights W1, W2, this sum is nothing but a multiplication of these two vectors. Okay, so if W is a vector, you are multiplying W transpose with X. That is what you are doing. And what is the importance of this vector multiplication? The importance of this vector multiplication is that you now have GPUs. Okay, so GPUs are nothing but graphical processing units which can handle these kind of matrix or vector operations quite well. There are multiple processors. There are a huge number of processors. So what you can do is that you can do this multiplication in one processor and this multiplication in another processor. Okay, so that is why matrix representation with the advent of this GPU is very important. Okay, because you can now parallelize the tasks very easily, which is one of, because there will be a lot of millions and billions of operations. These kind of multiplication matrix operations can be done in no time, and that is how this GPU actually enhanced the application of these machine learning concepts. Initially, it was people were working for a lot of years, spending a lot of their years, but because of computational resource scarcity, things were not moving forward. The GPU actually hit the right nail. They have actually made the operations faster, and so that's why this matrix operation or these linear operations becomes a very important concept, which is very closely tied with our machine learning or deep learning models, and that's what we'll have to understand a bit more carefully, right? So in the next class, with this initial flavor of this learning concept using neural networks, we'll move and we'll start with how things can be represented by linear algebra and how linearity or linear algebra will play a role in these parts. Then we'll see what are the properties of data representations using linear algebra concepts, what are the operations that can be done. All these parts we'll see very briefly. So the next classes, 2 to 3 classes, we'll spend on understanding a bit more about the linear algebra. Okay, and then we'll move forward. Any questions?
Sir, hello.
Yeah.
Sir, this is your second class, no, sir?
Yes.
Sir, actually, you have not sent me the mail. Actually, I am not in the first class, and also I have got the so
What's the
please
name
send
of
me. Sir, Priyaranjan Das. I have applied for deep learning, sir.
what is your branch?
Sir, computer science.
Okay. Then
And I have applied for deep learning, sir, but I am not getting any information regarding this class.
I have not sent any information prior to means after maybe last week where I mailed the join code. What information do you want? It is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 4 to 5. What information do you want? The link?
Sir, yeah, sir. Actually, I am not getting the link, sir.
Okay. So the TA for this course is Shashwato Roy. Okay. So
Okay.
you mail him. All these queries should be mailed to the TA.
Sir, you please give me the contact number
No,
or
you
something.
search for means you have the mailing system, how the mailing system works. So just type Shashwato and you will get shashwato.pcs17 or something like that. Shashwato, what is your email ID? Just if you can spell out.
Yes, sir. You are right, sir. Shashwato.pcs17.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mail
can you
it.
please send it in a?
I'll just write it. I'll just write it.
Okay.
Mute, please mute. Shashwata, can you type?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, please type.
Sir?
Yeah.
So in the perceptron training rule, you said choosing initial weight is a challenge. But if we are taking random values for it, then how is it a challenge, like taking random values?
I did not get again. Come with the question again.
Sir, in the perceptron training rule, you said we can take in the initial value for the weights can be taken as random values.
Yes.
But again, you said like it is a challenge, like.
Yeah, it's a challenge in the higher dimensions. So higher dimensions, your space. See, when you have a lot of means weights W1, W2, W3. Obviously, how many means, and you suppose want to find out the optimal values. Okay. So as the dimension, as the number of these variables increase, right, the exact value for which your loss would be minimum, that search space actually increases. So when you have a very large search space, okay, to find out the minimum value, if you take any random value, that might be very far away from the minimum value. That is what I am saying. So if you are near to the minimum value, then the number of iterations that would be required to reach the minimum will be low. But if you are quite far away from the minimum value, then the number of iterations that will be required to reach the minimum, because every time what you are doing, if you look at this graph, so just see this point. If you have taken the initial value of W1, W2 to be here, you can quickly reach the minimum. Right, but if you have taken it somewhere around here, it will take a lot of iterations to come down, and this is only for 2 dimensions, W1, W2. So if there are suppose 1000 of it, then this entire space becomes very large. Okay, so reaching the minimum point is considering the initial minimum, it's actually a challenge. You may be very far away, so there will be a lot of iterations that will be taken. And in multi-layer perceptron, the problem here is that you have a single minima. When you have multi-layer perceptrons, the function will be like this. The loss function that you are considering, that might be like this. Okay, and then you have a curve. Okay, this is the surface. So there will be a lot of these minimum, and out of which one of them will be a global minimum, there will be some local minimum. Okay, so if you start from say here W1, you might reach a minimum value over here. Okay, and you might be satisfied because you have reached some minimum value, because once you increase here again the gradient increases, so you will be satisfied that okay, I am reached the minimum. But actually this is not the real minimum. The real minimum lies here, and then it becomes a very big challenge. So if you had chosen some W1 W to be around here, you would have reached this minimum value, right? But if you have chosen somewhere here, you will never actually be able to reach this global minimum value. You will have to spend a lot of efforts, okay, reaching this value. So that's why it's a challenge. Okay, I have crossed the time by a huge margin, so let us stop today. We can again discuss more on this tomorrow.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.